Hey everyone, we've now completed 3 rounds of the 2025 NRL season. In this video, I'm going to review specifically all 8 games from round number 3 and break down each team's performance, what went well for them, what didn't work. So that not only I can keep my records every single week of teams' performances, so when I'm looking back on previous games, I'm not just looking at the final score or the stats from that game, we're looking at how that team overall performed and looking for deeper trends in their performance. If you don't keep records of these things, it's really easy to forget. So I'm going to go through each of the games. This is also information that's included in the NRL Best Bets membership. Round 3 overall from a betting perspective, for me, was a bit of a tricky round. We ended up going 2-6 overall, or 2-4 on the main plays. And on those main plays, the 4 that lost, 3 were very close to winning. So it was one of those rounds where it really could have gone either way. The 2 that won easily. The 4 that lost were touch and go. We had 1 too many tries in the Storm Panthers game. The Broncos Cowboys game fell a couple of points short. And then in the Sharks Rabbitohs game, we had Sam Stonestreet score a try, which he went over in the corner, but then it came back disallowed from the video referee. So tricky round overall, but this is why it's so important that you follow the staking structure, as that's what keeps you profitable long term. You can have losing bets here. You're never going to win every single bet, and you can have losing bets or a bit of a losing run where you lose a few bets in a row, but it doesn't derail your month or your entire season. The graph might take a slight little dip, but then it keeps on increasing and going in the positive direction where you're actually making money. From an overall betting perspective, the home teams won 6 of the 8 games. Only the Tigers and Bulldogs were the away teams who won. Home teams this week were favourite in 7 of the 8 games. Parramatta against the Bulldogs were the only home underdog, and they did cover the spread. Home teams covered in 4 of the 8 games, so that's covering the handicap. So if they're a favourite and they're -3.5, they have to win by 4 points or more. We'll go through game by game as we go through. The favourite won 7 of the 8 games. The Tigers were the only underdog to win outright when they beat the Dolphins. And the underdogs covered the spread in 5 of the 8 games. Panthers, Cowboys, Rabbitohs, Tigers, and Eels were all underdogs who covered the spread. And this week, 5 of the 8 games went under the total points betting line. Of the 3 that went over, 2 games only went over by 0.5 point and 1.5 points. So it's very close to being a 7-1 under round. So definitely keep that in mind. We saw a few overs rounds to start the season. Betting companies kept on increasing the total points line, and now it's flipped back the other way. So just definitely be aware of that when you're betting on totals. First game, we're going to look at Melbourne Storm versus Panthers on Thursday night. Panthers went into this game as underdogs, but were able to cover the spread, and the game went over the total points line. Early on in that first 10 minutes, the Storm quickly got away to a 12-0 lead, and the Panthers lost Nathan Cleary to a concussion during that period. And kind of from there, it was looking a bit like this could be a long game for the Panthers, especially coming off a loss the week prior against the Roosters. But to their credit, they hit back. Paul Alamotti crossed for 2 tries before halftime, and then going to the break, it was 14-10, so only a 4-point deficit to the Panthers. And then right after halftime, Casey McLean scored and put the Panthers in front. But Melbourne responded, as they usually do at home, scored 3 of the next 4 tries, and ended up winning by 6 points. For Melbourne, they started this game really strong, and I think they just became a bit complacent when Cleary went off injured. They started to go through the motions a bit. They forgot they were playing against Penrith. And at the end of the day, they did well to still win the game in the end. They had 15 errors, only 3 line breaks, and 37 less runs than the Panthers. So statistically, if Cleary was on the field and Penrith executed slightly better, could have gone a long way towards them winning that game. For Melbourne, this week they have their first road game of the season when they travel up to Sydney to face the Dragons, who are coming off the bye last week. Penrith, I think this was a really great effort from them to give themselves a chance to still win this game. Obviously, we spoke about in the preview for this round, this is a very tough road trip to go into Melbourne for the Panthers. They have a bad record going down and playing in Victoria, but they kept themselves in this game kind of through good discipline. 88% completion rate, still made 7 line breaks. They actually made more line breaks than the Melbourne Storm and only conceded the 3 line breaks on 23 missed tackles. So all really good defensive numbers, which is positive to see, but they still did concede 30 points in back-to-back weeks. They have another Thursday night game this week against the Rabbitohs, where they have a 2-day rest advantage going into this game and need a win to avoid a 3-game losing streak. And when we get to the Rabbitohs review, I'll tell you the last time Penrith lost 3 games in a row. Then the Warriors versus Roosters, the early game on Friday. The Warriors were small favourites for this game. They covered the spread and the game went under the total points line. Both teams were coming off wins last week, were 1-1 on the season. And during the first 20 minutes was 7 errors. And then the Roosters scored first through White, which was right next to the post. Rabbitohs scored shortly after, and at the end of halftime and going into halftime, the Roosters held a 2-point lead, but there was only 10 points scored in that first half for a game with the highest total points line of the round. After halftime, there was 25 minutes of gameplay with just 1 line break before the Warriors crossed for 2 tries to seal the game, 14 points to 6. There were only 6 penalties for this entire game, and with the penalty count favoring the Warriors 4-2 and set restarts 3-1. Meaning now the Warriors have won the penalty count and the set restart count in all 3 games they've played so far. For the Warriors, they control field position in this game right throughout, over 2,000 meters gained, 730 post-contact meters, and they did that on just 3 line breaks. Sometimes meters gained that statistic overall can be flawed if a team makes 8, 10, 12 line breaks in a game. But to just have 3 line breaks and still have over 2,000 meters shows they are making a lot of meterage without breaking the line and constantly pushing the Roosters back. They completed 86% of their sets and only made 6 errors compared to the Roosters' 13, which ultimately was the difference in the game. They had 37 tackles inside the 20-meter zone compared to just 11 for the Roosters down the other end. So total domination in terms of field position here for the Warriors. And overall, it's a very disciplined performance. They get extended rest this week before facing the Tigers on Sunday night. For the Roosters, because of that field position situation, they struggled to generate much attacking play, especially in the second half. They defended well in the first half to keep the Warriors to just a single try, but too many errors ended up proving costly for them. In that first half, that was where the Warriors had a lot of that good field position, but failed to capitalize on it, only having the 1 try, but they ended up getting the job done in the second half. For the Roosters, they need to compete more in the middle to give themselves more of a chance, especially as they don't have as many weapons as they've had in previous seasons. They play the Titans on Friday night, which that'll be an interesting game if the Titans bring their home form on the road with them down in Sydney. Later on Friday, the Broncos beat the Cowboys, but the Cowboys covered the spread as underdogs. It wasn't the try from Jackson Purdue late in the game that covered. Cowboys still would have covered anyway had the Broncos not scored a try in that situation, and the game went under the total points line. Overall, the Broncos were expected to win this game, but there were a lot of errors and set restarts through the first 20 minutes. Broncos ended up after that crossing for 2 tries, which both were, he scored 1 and the other one was from his kick, largely contributed by Adam Reynolds. Broncos went into halftime leading 12 points to 0. Cowboys scored on the first set after halftime and again 10 minutes later to level the game at 12, all with 25 minutes to go. Jesse Arthurs scored then to put the Broncos in front. As I said, 2 of their 3 tries were from a kick, and then their other try was from broken play, then running right down the field. That's off last week against the Sharks, where both their tries came from kicks, which for me gives me a lot of concern in their overall attack of them being able to actually generate tries from set plays and that kind of thing. They only conceded 3 penalties, but gave up 9 set restarts, which Broncos turned those into 7 line breaks. For the Cowboys, 15 errors and their worst completion rate of the season. So just not a good game overall. The fact they were still in contention, I guess, in that game with 25 minutes to go concerns me more for the Broncos than it does for the Cowboys. Back at home this week for North Queensland, facing Canberra, who are coming off their first loss of the season. Sharks beat the Rabbitohs, but the Rabbitohs covered the spread and the game went under the total points line. The Sharks kind of put the Rabbitohs away early and then coasted for the rest of this game. They scored 4 tries in the first 30 minutes. Took a 20-0 lead into halftime. Braden Trindle crossed immediately after halftime in the corner. Sharks led 26-0, and from that point just played for full time. Rabbitohs scored a couple of late tries to make it a more respectable scoreline, 27-12, but the game was well and truly over at halftime. Sharks, they won pretty much almost every key statistic, and the final score doesn't really represent their overall dominance, just winning by 15 points. Another one of these games they could have won by more and ultimately weren't able to cover what was a pretty big spread for them in the end. They completed 75% of their sets and broke 48 tackles, and defensively it's like where they won this game. They only missed 20 tackles and kept the Rabbitohs to just 1,350 meters. Trindle crossed for a try, had a try assist, and kicked two 40-20s in. A very good game for him. Probably should have ended up backing him to score a try in the end. He was one of the players I highlighted in the try scorer trends previous. Definitely watch that video. That'll be coming out late this week for the upcoming round. For the Sharks, it's good timing for them to face the Bulldogs, who have a few key injuries at the moment, and an opportunity to go 3-1 with another home game coming up. For the Rabbitohs, their low-risk approach, as I said, was going to be found out about against a good defensive side, which it was. Their only points came in the final stages, firstly from a kick and then a quick tap and go with Jamie Humphries. They got a penalty. The Sharks stopped, turned around, looking at the referee. He tapped it from about 15 to 20 meters out, zigzagged through the line, and was able to get the ball down near the post. They're definitely going to have to be a bit more creative against better defensive sides moving forward. One of their worst defensive performances, missing 48 tackles and, as I said, only 1,350 meters with the ball. Definitely going to be tested on Thursday night when they face the Panthers, who are going to be desperate to avoid losing 3 straight games. Panthers haven't lost 3 in a row since round 8, 2018. So you got to go back a long, long time since that has happened. We also have the Tigers, who are going for their 3rd consecutive win as well, which is a similar time frame, which we're going to look at in this game. So Dolphins versus Tigers. Tigers, the only underdog to win outright, which means they also covered the spread. And this game went over the total, but only just. This was a matchup locked up 6-all after 10 minutes. The Dolphins then scored 2 tries to lead 18-6. Talon De Silva crashed over from dummy half just before halftime, close the margin, and give the Tigers confidence going into the break with just a 6-point deficit. Through the first about 20 minutes, so between the 40th and 60th minute, Redcliffe had plenty of chances to put this game away. Even though they were only leading by 6, they could have scored 2-3 tries during that period and created a deficit too big for the Tigers to come back. During that 20 minutes, Tigers made 4 errors and gave away 5 penalties and set restarts combined, but the Dolphins failed to score any points during that period. After that, though, the Tigers ran in 3 tries in a 12-minute period to seal the game 30 points to 18. Even though the scoreline reflects a statistical edge for the Tigers, Dolphins, the way this game was played, really should have won, especially at home, but once again, it's becoming a pattern for them. They can't execute and get over the line when they have consistent plays inside the 20-meter zone, which is definitely a problem. They made 12 errors compared to just 7 for the Tigers. And as I said, they couldn't capitalize when the Tigers kept on making mistakes and giving Dolphins that good field position. Those mistakes that they did make, though, forced them to keep defending their line. And the Tigers ended up having 37 plays inside the 20-meter. They have another tough matchup this week against the Broncos and need to win to avoid going 0-4, but it looks unlikely that's going to happen. For the Tigers, back-to-back wins and a strong performance by them, both in attack and defense. And it does seem kind of crazy that so far this season we're through 3 weeks, and the Tigers, who've been the worst defensive side for a number of years now, are now sitting with the best defensive metrics. And the Panthers, who've been the best defensive side, have some of the worst defensive metrics. So, a bit of crazy times from that perspective. For the Tigers, they nearly threw this game away in that 20 minutes after halftime. But luckily for them, the Dolphins didn't capitalize. But it was also Tigers put in good defensive effort to hold them out. And they did take advantage when they got their own chances. 85% completion rate, which alone makes you very hard to beat. And only 24 missed tackles, all very positive signs. They're likely to be favorites this week. And get the chance to win 3 straight games for the first time since round 6, 2018. Titans versus Knights. Titans at home were backed into favoritism. They won, covered, and the game went under the total. This was a very low-scoring game. The Titans scored 4 tries to 0 and led 26-0 through to the 70th minute. Going back earlier in the game, they took a 12-0 lead into halftime, and when Fermor Cross beating 4 defenders, being able to get all the way and plant the ball down on the line, midway through the second half, at that point, it was a long way back for Newcastle. Fafita sealed the game with 12 to go. Bradman Best scored a bit of a messy try late to at least get the Knights on the board, but 26-6 was the final score. This game had 18 penalties plus 8 set restarts, not to mention 28 errors. Keep in mind, it was obviously in wet conditions, so 28 errors is still a very high number, but there's a bit of an excuse for it. But 18 penalties and 8 set restarts, so 26 combined is a lot for a single game. Titans, though, good win at home for them. They took their chances in attack, put a winning score on the board, completed 81%. They were helped defensively by Newcastle's lack of execution. Knights had 18 errors and lots of good field position, but were wasteful. Gold Coast still missed 45 tackles, which is definitely an area they need to improve when they go up against better attacking sides. Big game for them on Friday night down in Sydney against the Roosters, where they get the opportunity to test their form on the road. For the Knights, they're definitely going to be disappointed with their performance. They went into this game 2-0. They had more than enough chances to score, but couldn't break down the Titans' defensive line, especially inside that 20-meter zone where they had a lot of ball. 39 missed tackles in defense is a bit of a concern for them, who are generally really good, and this is like the focal point of their overall game. Only completed 67% with those 18 errors. They have the bye this week where they can kind of regroup and then before facing the Bulldogs next Sunday. So a long break over 2 weeks before their next game. On Sunday, the Eels versus Bulldogs. Bulldogs were favourite, but the Eels covered. The Bulldogs won the game outright and the game went under the total. The trend of low-scoring games between these two sides continued. A very low final score here. Bulldogs winning 16 points to 8. Bulldogs scored all 3 of their tries in the first half, led 14-4 at halftime. Josh Adokar scored against his old side shortly after halftime, and it was a 6-point margin for the final 30 minutes. So at the 50th minute mark, or just prior to that, was the score, 14-8. And then throughout that final 30 minutes or so, Parramatta had a lot of chances. It was kind of like the Bulldogs were holding on. Parramatta were trying to equalise, but just couldn't get that try that they needed. And then a late penalty goal on full time gave the Bulldogs that extra 2 points. For the Eels, this was definitely an improved performance. In what was against an undermanned Bulldogs side, the new inclusions for them definitely made a difference. This is a game I feel like they could have stolen, considering they had the better of the ball in the second half, but they made too many mistakes. Overall, 12 errors to just the Bulldogs 5, and ended up just wasting too many chances. But overall, a much better defensive performance, even though the Bulldogs were a bit controlled in the way they play. They weren't really taking any risks, and against a more attacking flair side, they may still tend to struggle. They only conceded 4 line breaks though, which was half of what they've conceded the last 2 weeks. Another tough game though coming up against the Seagulls this week for them. Bulldogs, they're going to be glad they won this game, got out there with the 2 points and can move on. It was a very controlled, workmanlike game, complete 86% of their set. Be strong in defense, they were able to withstand and just back themselves in defensively in that second half. But they may not have been able to do that against a better attacking side. So that's one thing to keep in mind going forward. They're now one of only 2 undefeated sides, the other being the Storm. And keep in mind, though, they have had an easy draw so far, and they're going to need to be a lot better to beat the Sharks on the road this week. Final game of the round, Seagulls, big winners against Canberra, put their 2-0 record and ended that. The Seagulls, as favourites, won, covered, and the game went over, but only just got over the total points line. There was 0 points through the first 20 minutes, so people who backed the overs probably very glad it still hit. Even though there was no points, the Raiders still conceded 10 penalties and set restarts during that first 20 minutes, plus 3 errors. So Manly had all the ball during that first 20 minutes, but Canberra were able to hold them out. And that barrage of penalties ultimately resulted in Corey Horsburgh being sent to the sin bin. And that was the turning point of this game. The Seagulls rolled in 4 converted tries during that 10-minute period. Well, the 4th one was right as Horsburgh was coming back on the field, I guess. But he'd only just gotten into line at the moment they crossed for that 4th try. But virtually 10 minutes after he was sent to the bin, Manly were leading 24-0, 4 converted tries, and it was basically game over from there. Garrett got his 2nd try right before halftime. Manly led 30-0, and they didn't take the foot off the gas. They kept it going after halftime. Garrett got his 3rd and 4th try, put Manly up 40-0, and they coasted home from that point. A couple of late tries from the Raiders pushed this game over the total, but that's all it really did. For the Seagulls, it was a complete domination performance, and they really took their opportunity in that first 30 minutes, had a lot of the ball. Raiders were just gassed defensively. I think Canberra made over 400 tackles. One thing that's a little bit concerning is, I wouldn't read too much into it, but when it was 13-13, the Seagulls only scored 16 points to the Raiders 12. But as I said, they made the most of them opportunities, completed 87% compared to the Raiders. They completed 87% of their sets, had 64% of possession, and just made 6 errors overall. This was a good bounce back performance for them after last week when losing to the Warriors, and to do it without Tom Trbojevic. They did lead the penalty set restart count combined 17-5. They're going to be big favourites again this week against the Eels to get another win. For the Raiders, this was their worst game so far. They only had 28 total sets. That's minus 20 to the Seagulls. So Manly had 48. The Raiders only had 28. And that resulted in just 36% of possession. They gave away far too many penalties at the end of the day to make this game competitive. They're minus 12 on the penalty set restart count and were forced to make over 400 tackles. Another tricky game for them, another week on the road coming up, this time to go to Townsville. But realistically, it's a game they should win. But even against the Cowboys, they can't afford to play like they did this week and be so undisciplined. And it's not always an easy road trip going up to Townsville. So that's the summary of round number 3. I'm looking ahead to round number 4. There's going to be a betting trends preview coming up shortly, plus the try scorer trends preview on this channel, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss those. If you want to follow all my bets right throughout the season so you can profit on the NRL, plus get access to the Bet Finder tools, which are updated for 2025 season stats now moving forward, have all the try scorer trends, everything you need to make good betting decisions, then definitely check out the NRL Best Bets membership. I'll put the link to that in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.